This is an Irish independent podcast.
Hey everyone, Bits and Bobs coming at you. Happy to say Conan here in studio. Conan, hello.
Hello, Joe.
And look what the cat's dragged in. Conor McKeown.
John Malloy. Conan Doherty.
I knew when you were on today somebody from the Dublin football team would retire, and there we go, right on cue. Brian Fenton, who we'll come to in due course. Do you like our new studio?
Oh, it's very nice.
Oof.
It is very nice. It's like going to a furniture shop or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Nice vibes.
We had many emails in complaining about the studio, and we assured people good things were imminent.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is the first step. If you're just listening, the podcast studio that we're in had kind of a beige background behind us, some TV screens. That's all been replaced by some dark, oaky type wood, would you say?
It's just where serious journalism goes on. That's kind of the vibe it gets off, isn't it?
The lighting is still a little bit abrasive.
Okay.
You get to our age, lighting becomes really important. But I think there are plans afoot to have softer lighting due course. So this place,
Yeah.
you know. We've a few things to get to. Rugby later on with Eddie O'Sullivan. There will be another one Thursday, another episode Thursday with Ian Madigan and Keane Tracy after the team announcement on Thursday. Our Autumn Nation Series coverage is with thanks to our friends at Energia, of course. They have come on board as our rugby sponsor. They support rugby at all levels, from grassroots and the AIL right the way through to the Irish men's and women's teams. And you can check out energia.ie/rugby for more information on all of that. So Eddie O'Sullivan is on the way. I have emails in. There's one about my conversation yesterday with Damon Delaney from Column. I have abbreviated some of these emails down because they're lengthy. So Column says, just in the interest of balance, I wanted to quickly read this. Loving the podcast. I was listening yesterday. Damien and you were talking about being delighted with how Ireland played. I appreciate Heimir Hallgrímsson's only 6 games in. Heimir, only 6 games in, so I'm not writing him off. I also think he's very likeable. But we literally lost 5-0 to our biggest rivals. There was an epic collapse. If what had happened against England happened to Kenny, the knives would have been out. 5-0 tonking never happened under Kenny, even when it was awful. And that's despite playing Portugal, France, Belgium and the Netherlands. That is not to justify how difficult his reign was. Similarly, the performance at the Aviva against England was one of the worst we've had in a very long time. I appreciate things have been awful more or less since Euro 2016, so we're looking for any hope at all. But please, can't be delighted with a 5-0 loss. Anyway, sorry for giving out, and I did still genuinely enjoy the podcast. Keep up the great work. Kind regards, Colin. So nice blue sky finish to his email there.
Yeah. I think Dan made this point actually on your podcast the other day, and maybe this is a small bit exaggerated, but for some reason I think Heimir gets a small bit of credit in the bank because of his honesty. Maybe I don't know whether that's somebody as a journalist speaking that you're kind of so used to decoding the very defensive messages that managers give out after a collapse or a big loss or an unexpected defeat or whatever it is. But for some reason I kind of, maybe ultimately it's not going to matter in the long run, but I can take it a little bit easier because he's so honest about it.
Yeah, that's true.
He's pretty face value.
Very disarming when he comes on and sums up a game so honestly.
Yeah.
I think he's removed from all the politics as well. Sometimes you have an outsider coming in, it's like he doesn't care as much about the internal conflicts, and then we almost give him a pass on that as well, whereas Kenny was immediately a civil war and there's people immediately looking for arguments for and against Kenny from the outset. And I do agree with the email, though. I do think as much as I agreed with yourself and Damien's analysis, I think a 5-0 loss, Stephen Kenny would have been all week saying that he should be losing his job.
And the Kenny thing as well, it became very even just watching this from afar, it became very there was that kind of culture war thing. But I think the Irish, maybe I'm doing them a disservice here, but I think the Irish press pack were pretty split, and there obviously would have been some residual relationships, and then I'd say in some cases residual tension, whereas with Heimir it's a room full of people. I don't think he necessarily has any chips on his shoulder, or even I don't know whether he's gotten close to any of the Irish journalists since he's been here, but it comes across that he's very much face value man.
Yeah. So yesterday we mentioned and played to you Brian Peters giving that Jobsworth press officer piece of his mind.
Are you joking? Are you out of your mind? Everyone else gets 3 people up. Don't be acting this shit.
Don't worry.
3 people go up or not at all. Come on,
you.
big boy. Make your decision now. Make it. Come on, big boy. No.
Well, Richard Lowry was in touch. 2003. Bob Sapp is an MMA fighter. Mike Tyson wants to fight him.
Sign the contract, big boy. Sign the contract.
Turns out, Brian Peters, it was a homage to Tyson. Richard Lowry, what a spot. How do you remember that from 2003?
That's one of those, I've come across that before. That's one of those very sort of memeable things that people bring into it on the occasion that there's a contract to be signed. You sound very like Michael Jackson there, Tyson, does he?
Oh yeah, gives it again.
Sign the contract, big boy. Sign the contract.
Sounds absolutely nothing like Mike Tyson.
No, do you know who he sounds like? Andre 3000 from... What were they called?
Is that the Outcast?
Yeah.
Yes.
Outcast, yeah.
There we go. This really is 2003 here. So Brian Peters, even under fire, was playing checkers when everybody else was. Which one is which? Checkers and chess?
Chess is the good one, yeah.
He was playing chess. I'm playing checkers right now. There's an email in then from John, who's over in New York. This is kind of interesting. As a Kerry man living in New York, I was hoping Ireland would qualify for the next World Cup. I now accept that's unlikely to happen. Whilst it's also unlikely that Northern Ireland will qualify, with the way they're currently performing, I'd say it's more likely than ourselves. My question then is, would it be okay to go and support Northern Ireland at a game if they do qualify for said World Cup? Michael O'Neill seems like a very likeable guy. They've lots of young players with no baggage. They seem to be growing into the international game. However, there is the obvious issue with supporting them, a long-standing toxicity between North and South over many years, which has led to some unsavoury scenes and some bad-blooded matches. In brackets, he says, I'm not just talking about Conor Bradley's Tyrone GA background here, ! Seriously though, if they did qualify, I'd be interested in going to a game to support them, but I'd be curious as to how this would be received. Loving the podcast, John Brennan, New York. Interesting one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't. Do we have an official rule? So, say if this was England, if he was saying, I think I might go and support England at the World Cup, then the quick answer would be, listen, John, you do you.
Yeah.
You know, it's a free world. Go support England. But our official rule is obviously we don't tend to do that. That's not.
Yeah.
You know, you're sort of breaking the rules, but whatever, go do it.
Yeah.
But I don't actually know what's our kind of unwritten rule when it comes to supporting Northern Ireland. So Northern Ireland now is God Save the King. It's Windsor Park. It's predominantly, I presume, a unionist Protestant background. But then you have someone like Conor Bradley going in. You have the likes of Neil Lennon before him, albeit received a lot of abuse. So what is our... I never actually discussed it with friends. What's our unofficial stance on supporting the North?
We haven't been in that position before, have we? Is this the first time with a cup? Like, just it's a funny thing. I got a couple of text messages from people on Sunday inquiring as to Tom McKibben's background, as though like, well, are we allowed to support this guy in the PGA Tour next year? You know, and it's the same sort of thing. But maybe the football team. Because I think obviously football teams, national football teams, are intrinsically political, you know, with things like anthems and, as we saw in Wembley at the weekend, these displays of military regalia as well. Maybe there's something tied into that. I hadn't considered it now. It's an interesting question. I think sporting wise, if Northern Ireland were in a World Cup, I don't know that we make these decisions. I think it tends to be a bit of a gut feeling, and I don't know whether you could until you found yourself in that position. I
find it very hard not to wish Conor Bradley well playing in a World Cup game.
Yeah, like the point you're making there, individuals I think is different to the team. So Rory McIlroy, Darrell Gurney in the darts.
Well, sorry, what? I mean, I've gone to Conor there. I never even asked. I couldn't care less. Are you? You're I've always presumed because you're GAA, you're Catholic and Conan O'Doherty, nationalist background. But how do you look at the Northern Ireland team?
I'm Irish, so for me, it's never been a thing. And like, I think growing up...
Would you say it's a Tuesday night and they're playing a match and the Republic are not playing and it's on TV? Are you hoping they beat Armenia?
No, I am ambivalent to Northern Ireland. Like, I don't even hold any ill will towards them. I actually look at them like I would look at Wales, or probably Scotland's a better example, because when you see Scotland doing well now, it's a little bit like, because we feel like we should be at that level. We feel like we should be doing better than Scotland. So it's almost like I would find it hard to support Northern Ireland mostly for that reason.
So that's more of a footballing issue than a political issue.
My team should be doing better. If my team, I remember at the Euros, Northern Ireland were there, but I had no like graw for it. I wasn't invested in it. Happy for the like of Niall McGinn, who's from Tyrone as well, GA man. Yeah. Shane Ferguson's from Derry, GA man. Did a few interviews with him when I worked in Derry. Happy for them, but the team, it wasn't like I was getting behind it, and I was happy because Ireland were having a better tournament.
Yeah. But equally, you're not anti it.
I'm not anti it, and there's almost two answers. So John's asking, is it okay to go to go support it? Yes, it's definitely okay to go support them.
Now don't bloody sing "God Save the King," John, when you go.
And yeah,
I just think the Kerry man in you at a certain point has to draw the line.
Yeah. And this is the real issue as well, because I know we can all come on and say, we're moving on, things are different. But they're not as well. Like you said, Windsor Park is so immersed in the Unionist area. It's on the Lisburn Road. Linfield play there, and they do stand for God Save the King when you're there. I remember interviewing Shane McCullough. He was a underage coach in the IFA. He managed Darren Gibson at under 16 level, and he also works in Ulster University and did a paper in player eligibility and things like that. So really, really good to chat to him about it. He's obviously so invested in Northern Ireland football, but he was very honest about the anthem being the biggest problem, because we're asking these players from a nationalist background to not only come into the Lisburn Road, into Windsor Park, to then stand for that. And obviously with the Republic of Ireland, they're going to have more opportunities. The way we think of the English players, it looks better for them to go play for England. But outside of that, they're also Irish. So I always think if it's a choice, they're going to just go play for Republic of Ireland. I'm so disappointed with Conor Bradley, can I just say, because I just think he probably cashed his chips in a bit too early. Probably maybe didn't realise that like this opportunity will come along. Playing for Northern Ireland's obviously great.
And is there no part of the newer generation, God Save the King aside, Windsor Park aside, and there are big things to just say, let's cast them aside for 1 second. Is there no part of the newer generation born post Good Friday Agreement, the Troubles are ancient history to them? This is a new era. Northern Ireland's a new country, and I'm not Irish, I'm not British, I'm Northern Irish, and therefore I'm playing for Northern Ireland. Is that sentiment not growing?
It's growing, but if you see the census, it's still a very small percentage. It's still mostly Irish, British, and then Northern Irish would be the third on that list.
Rory McIlroy, in an interview with Paul Kimmage a couple of years ago, felt more Northern Irish
and this
than
is
either.
Yeah, and I wanted to be clear, like, when I talk like this, it's not even a political thing. Like where I grew up, it's so Irish, like you just follow Ireland. And actually in Derry, you're not surrounded. I didn't meet a unionist until I went to college, for example.
What?
Yeah. Like
you did?
I didn't. Like, well, not that I was aware of.
If I'd known.
And I would have known. But yeah, like that's...
Wait, sorry, what do you mean you didn't?
And that's not me avoiding.
How could you not meet a unionist?
Well, I went to a Gael school, and then I went to a Catholic all-boys school in Derry, just down the street.
But like when you go to the shop, you get stuck for petrol somewhere. Is it just there's no unionists around?
Well, you'd be able to tell. No, like not in my day-to-day life.
Right,
like,
okay.
I'm sure I've come across them.
I would think so,
but not like engaged or anything like that. And that's not me avoiding it either. I'd be happy to engage.
They keep their toaster in the press. Is that what they had from?
That's how you would know.
Yeah. Derry Girls, one of the great sketches of all time.
Yeah, but you would strike me very sincerely as just like such a lovely person. Everyone you meet. So I can't think when you first met this your first unionist, I can't think you were in any way unfriendly.
Well, you say that, and then I lived...
and then I hit him.
I lived in college in second year with 6 people, 5 nationalists and Protestant Dave.
All right, Protestant Dave. You see, you like him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like he's still called Protestant Dave, which is probably...
That's great. But that means when you have a sense of humour about it, that's the next step.
And he did, it was around the same time, the Henri handball, and he did have the last laugh then, because we were all watching the game together. He was Northern Irish, and he was loving this.
So he was loving Henri then?
Yeah, he hung up an Henri Barcelona jersey on the wall and stuff.
Yeah, well, I think if the question...
Sorry, then feck them.
Yeah, I think if the question was flipped, I'm not sure we're getting a whole pile of...
unionist,
floating Northern Irish supporting us in the World Cup.
What do you think official Ireland's position would be? And by that I mean, say RTE are doing the match. Now, if it was England playing, there'd be a standoffishness and a critique of England. If Northern Ireland were playing an RTE, and an RTE goes out in the north as well, would it be very much... God, I'm delighted they got that goal. Would the atmosphere be very pro? We're not even pretending to be neutral, do you think? Or would we be a little bit more standoffish?
I think it'd be strange. Like, even if you think from the point of view of, obviously, we can take Northern Irish players because of the Good Friday Agreement, because some of them are Irish, but they can't take any of our players. So what would we really be watching apart from the like of Conor Bradley, Niall McGinn, Paddy McCourt, boys down through the years, like who are Irish and identify as Irish? It would be a strange one, although maybe over the years that will become less strange because the individual sporting examples that we're talking about, like the like of Darrell Gurney, like I definitely support him in the darts, but you know, if he was playing football, he'd be playing for Northern Ireland, and then suddenly there's a bit more interest because of territory.
It's an interesting one. I mean, obviously the message, John, in New York is go live your life. I mean, for God's sake.
Just don't tell anyone about it.
But do not tell anyone, clearly.
It's yet another problem that Ireland's call could solve.
Well, indeed. Indosport podcast at independent.ie. What age were you when you met your first unionist? And we'll talk about that next week. Hey, let's go from that to Israel. So Connor emailed in, "Hi guys, loving the show, don't miss an episode. My other podcasts are piling up as I don't have time for everything. My brain is getting dumber without David McWilliams and The Economist, etc. I just wanted to give you my thoughts on the Robbie Keane situation. I was listening to your show last week discussing Robbie when your guest, Aidan Fitzmaurice, was very critical about Robbie. I felt a bit too critical. Your guest was very certain that once the events on October 7th occurred that Robbie should have left his job. At that stage, however, Hamas were the ones who had attacked, murdered and taken innocent civilians as hostages. I think it's very easy for someone who's looking back to make sweeping comments about what someone should have done. I'm sure it was not easy for Robbie, who ultimately did leave Maccabi Tel Aviv. He put a lot of time and effort in, most likely at friends and colleagues who he trusted and who trusted in him. And I'm sure there could have been personal reasons to stay longer too. I think too much pressure is put on our sports stars to act when they are not political people. Look at our ladies basketball team and what they went through when they had to play Israel shortly after Israel's retaliation. By no means am I standing up for Israel. They are murderers and they're carrying out a clear genocide with the aid of the US, and they need to be held accountable. I just think your guest was too critical of Robbie, and I think a more balanced debate should have been made. Your show reaches a lot of people who may have been swayed against Robbie by your guest's personal views. Anyway, still loving the show. Thanks for your time, Connor. Please don't read my second name. And Jesus, these are long emails once you get started. That is a shortened down email. Interestingly, Rob using quite a few of the back pages this morning because he was talking on Rio Ferdinand's podcast this week, and a slightly long clip, but I think he deserves to be heard at length. Here is Robbie explaining the Tel Aviv situation to Rio Ferdinand.
Yeah, well, let's make it clear. Obviously, there's been a lot of stuff going on. I resigned at the end of the season from my post in Maccabi Tel Aviv. Yeah, but what people understand, when it did happen, obviously we left. But I've got 5 staff. I've got a lot of foreign players who rely on me as their coach. We're winning the league. We're in Europe doing very, very well. My analyst guy, for example, he's got a mortgage. He's got a family. He's got kids that he has to feed. So the decision just to step away from something, it's not just my decision, it's everybody else's decision, which was tough. Let's make it clear, what's happening is terrible and nobody wants to see it, and hopefully it ends very, very soon. But at the end of the day, I'm a football manager and my staff have got people to look after, and I've got a duty of care. And my analyst guy, for example, was at Middlesbrough for 12 years. And for him to come with me, and then for me just to walk away from that and leave him and his family, because you can't just walk into a job. It's difficult to walk into a job straight away after leaving a post for 12 years. He's just one example. Then I've got other staff. So I've got players calling me, please don't leave, coach. Don't leave what you've done for this club, blah, 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 whatever it may be. So I've made the decision to stay till the end of the season and walk away from a big contract, another year, possibly two more years. And we made that decision as a group and as a staff. But to go and win the league and to win the double, nobody can ever take that away from me.
So I think his reasons for staying there seem very fair, honestly held. We did a piece when he first went, before October happened, on Off the Ball, and it was a politician been just very critical of him going in the first place. And I would have tended to agree with that, because it was fairly well established at that stage that what was going on already in that part of the world was a disgrace. It was already being called an apartheid by the UN. If you read through the things that were going on in the West Bank, stopping family members from seeing each other because different accreditations were needed to get to different parts of different quarters, and not to mention the illegal resettlements and kids and families standing outside watching their house being bulldozed in tears. It's a horrific situation. And Maccabi Tel Aviv are a very political club, as Aidan Fitzmaurice pointed out last week. So I had a problem with him going in the first place, and a lot of people did. At the same time, I thought, well, he's not a political, a keen political person. He's a football person, and it's his choice. And so don't think much of it, but I'm not consigning him to cancellation either. Then October 7th happens. I agree with the point. October 7th is not an Israeli attack on Palestine. It's a Hamas attack on Israel. So it's unreasonable to expect him to leave on the 8th, unless he was leaving for his own safety. But I do, where I think it gets harder and harder to justify him staying is obviously within each passing day, hour after the 7th, when the nature of the Israeli response became apparent. Not to mention a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, 4 months later, 5 months later, still there. Then, it's harder. And our Ireland's fellowship with the Palestinians is so keenly felt. That's a tricky uphill task for him to ever win an argument. Albeit, I'm not unsympathetic to him saying, "Yeah, look, and he does say there, what's going on is horrific, and we want it to stop. I have a loyalty to this I know this person. I know his family. He's a mortgage to pay. He's with Middlesbrough 12 years. I've dragged him over here. I'm just going to walk out on him. And there's other people like that. That's difficult for me to do. If I was face to face with him, I wouldn't say, well, you're a disgrace necessarily for that. I understand it's difficult. Where do you think he is with everyone?
Well, I'm glad he did this. I was trying to figure out whether he was going to say anything, because obviously there was some response online from his wife, who was kind of maybe making a case on X.
She says they've been physically threatened and had to install cameras at the house, which I don't think anybody would condone.
No, absolutely not. And I was trying to figure out with Robbie, I always got the impression, and I've never worked a kind of soccer beat, but I always got the impression that there was a cool enough relationship with the media over here. That would be my impression of it. I might be wrong. But obviously there's a great proliferation of podcasts these days. And he went to an ex-teammate. Did they play together at Leeds? Yeah, they probably did. Roommates. But I'm glad that he stayed at his position, and I think more people will have sympathy for him. But ultimately, I am in the stable of people that thought that he was wrong to go in the first place, albeit I would accept that if you're not, whatever about having a sort of a political and a social conscience, some people might not be that politically aware in the first place to have developed that conscience. And when he was saying, I'm only going for the football, that rang a little bit hollow. Sometimes you're putting yourself in a situation that's maybe not of your own making, but you're going to suffer from. He's
certainly at that point couldn't feel very hard done by if people like you, me, Conan said, I'm sorry, I'm not speaking for anyone, but if anyone said, well, I just don't rate you as highly a person anymore, I think he'd have to accept, well, that's a price I'm willing to pay, but it's not a ridiculous price to pay. It's justifiable that people would not think much of it.
Yeah, and I felt sorry for him too, the stuff about the contract that people were kind of throwing at him too, and that was not an issue of Robbie Keane's making. He signed,
the FAI one.
Yeah, he signed a contract in good faith, and then, that bizarre succession policy that was put in place at the time of the Mick McCarthy Stephen Kenny appointment ended up costing him his position in the senior team. But I totally understand why he saw out his contract with the FAI, why he didn't pull the plug from it earlier on. He was perfectly entitled to that. But in this situation, because I would like to think that what's going on at the moment, eventually we will look back at it and see it for what it is.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be one of the great, and I mean that in the pejorative sense, tragedies of all time, and one of the big regrets of us as a civilization that this continued.
What's even so insane is no hindsight is needed. We're already there.
Yeah, we're already there. But for like, there are good, like if you go to certain parts of the world, the prevailing opinion is not quite as established in the direction that we are in this part of the world.
I actually think I'd go out of my mind in that. I think one of the few like graces is that I live in a country where there seems to be a bit of common sense about this situation. But I couldn't imagine being in the States or the UK and people saying, yeah, listen, proper order.
Yeah, go to town, yeah.
Yeah, it's actually, I was only listening to a podcast yesterday. I think it was like a business podcast, or it was a guy who travels, a very big podcast, and he's talking about his experiences in North Korea, and he said, just so flippantly and easily, like the only regime that he would hate to be taken captive of more than North Korea is Hamas, and just continued going on with his sentence, but just how normalised that is as well, like and just decide that sort of him and obviously everybody who listens to the podcast and surrounds him in the US have taken on this great tragedy that you're talking about. The Keane thing is, it's hard, isn't it, in terms of if you're completely just absorbed living a football life, and you're looking at Eddie Howe and how he handled that, just thinking, I'll just do a few awkward interviews for a few weeks and then it'll go away. Like all he said the whole time was, I'm a football coach. Now him and his team are out in Saudi Arabia, it seems, every international break, just out there, like at the boxing in the last international break. Gareth Southgate, just as a higher profile manager with a higher profile team at a higher profile tournament, the World Cup, how they just folded like a pack of cards because of a threat of a yellow card, and how hollow a lot of that stuff is then as well. It must be like, if that's all you're consuming and all you're thinking about and all you model yourself on, it must be too easy to just think like that's where I stand as well, like that's where I come in this world, like I'm a football coach too. And the only thing, and not to be churlish or anything, would the response have been the same if they were sitting fifth in the table?
Like, yeah, he does himself say we're going well in Europe.
Yeah,
I suppose the obvious response to what he said there is, listen, I'm not unsympathetic to that. Your personal loyalty to people, that complicates things. But even as a staff, shouldn't you all sat around and said, we can't be a part of this, let's go? If you've been the video guy for Middlesbrough for 12 years, your CV is pretty good. You'll probably get a job eventually back home in the UK, within reason. So I don't know. I suspect he may get a touch more sympathy for coming out and talking like that. But I think a lot of people will still say...
It sounded like that he was also making the point of stating that he resigned and he stepped down from the job.
Yeah, he did have a 3-year contract.
So he's making that point, but... Yeah. But if he's saying that in such a way, like, look, I'm not completely tone deaf to the stuff I've stepped down, you're thinking, well, was the getting into Europe and winning the double worth finishing that year? Like, it's either a good reason or it's not.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I do think that he was put in an unfair position, but I'm not sure whether... I think with the passing of time, you get a bit more perspective on it, and I don't think it was. I mean, I wouldn't agree with his move at all. But I'm with you on this, Joe, in that you don't know what it's like in a personal situation. You don't know what it's like working with staff. You don't know how kind of invested in this. And I'd like to know that I'd like to get a sense of in Tel Aviv how touched by all of this people are there. Like, because geographically, it's not. They're not.
Well, Aidan was saying last week there are scenes of IDF soldiers going into the Tel Aviv dressing room or training ground and like showing the players their body cam footage. It's a very political club, so they knew. I mean, that's how do you say, right, lads, training?
Yeah, and was before one of the games they were signing bombs or one of that sort of ilk of thing. It was reported at the time. I don't think Keane was there too. Yeah. But it like a bit like the anthems, and when we're talking about Northern Ireland and the sort of like, I know international sport is always very politicised, but even watching the Premier League recently and the lone bugler before some of the games, like it unfortunately, because the two are so intertwined, you can't kind of plead innocence and say, well, I'm only here for the sporting reasons, because it comes as part of the package.
Yeah, and then especially if you say, well, I did leave at the end of the year, as you say, but hang on, that was politically motivated, but it's not. There's no politics involved in your original decision. Let's move on. So that was Keane with Rio Ferdinand this week. Let me take you back. It's 2015. Britain is in the European Union. Apparently Donald Trump is about to run for president, and young whippersnapper for Dublin is playing a National League game against Monaghan in April 2015.
Jack McCaffrey full of energy, drive, enthusiasm. Dublin coming through in their draws, chance of a goal. What a shot! It's the new kid on the block. Rahini's Brian Fenton thought about laying it off, decided the opportunity was there, and he cracked it all.
The new kid on the block is now retired. Brian Fenton has announced his retirement today after 10 seasons with Dublin. Where do you start? Represented Dublin in over 60 matches in the Championship, including a run of 45 matches unbeaten. He was Footballer of the Year not once but twice. He won 7 All-Irelands, 6 in a row. And Footballer of the Year in 18 and 20, as well as 6 All-Stars. And he is saying, mic drop, done. When you guys were talking about James McCarthy the last day, I agreeing with the greatness, and splitting hairs between the likes of Fenton and McCarthy is a fool's errand. I stress that. But I was quietly holding my powder on the best outfield player Dublin have had, because a voice at the back of my mind was saying, it's Fenton though. It's Fenton. I'm a Fenton man. I'm so sorry. I'm just so sad I'm not going to see him play for Dublin again. I would say in 22 he was not himself. And then he came out in 23 with a vengeance and drove Dublin. I mean, I just picked up that team and said, I'm a leader. We're winning the All-Ireland. Drove Dublin to win the All-Ireland 23. Was exceptional again, 24, just gone. And that he's just saying, right, I'm out. God, say it ain't so.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's ever been a Gaelic footballer anyway. Maybe you could argue DJ Carey in hurling, but he came back that has retired from such a height. Like you're talking about a guy who could very plausibly be Footballer of the Year next year. He hasn't started to wane. He's 31 years of age. Athletically, he's in perfect shape, absolutely perfect shape. So I know people like Jack McCaffrey maybe, but that always felt like they were opting out. Like they didn't release any retirement statements, whereas the Dublin County Board released one for Fenton this morning. But the debate that you're saying, I know this is maybe splitting hairs, but I think McCarthy's thing is greatness, because he had this profound influence on the team. But in terms of ability, as a footballer, as the overall package, Fenton is just totally superb. I remember speaking to Kieran Whelan or maybe Davy Henry, one of the Raheny lads, about him when he was coming through. And they were saying that if he could build a footballer in a laboratory, in terms of size, pace, handling, skills, Fenton is what you would come up with.
Not to mention an ability to make point kicking from distance look easy.
Cruising around the pitch.
Cruising.
Yeah.
So brilliant. It's sound as well.
Yeah. And
Andy's sound. Throw that in.
Yeah, I was just thinking out an old interview that I had done with him as well, where we were just chatting about Westlife for 3 minutes. I mean, this is the best footballer in Ireland, and there you are, just shooting the breeze about what the best Westlife song is.
Is he a Westlife fan?
Big Westlife fan, yeah. We're talking about the best key changes, and we're getting into granular detail.
There'd be a weakness, but there had to be something.
But unbelievable. You're saying about he has everything. I had the misfortune of playing against him a few times for Raheny.
Really, yeah.
And I've never seen somebody so big be so hard to get a hand on. I don't even know if I've touched him. I played against him twice. I don't even know if I literally got a hand on him. He's so agile as well, which is ridiculous, and so powerful to burst away off the spot. Just has everything. Has anybody ever done more in a 10-year spell?
I was talking to somebody about that this morning, and they made a very good point that between 1975 and 1984, Jack O'Shea's 10 years is definitely a rival for Fenton. Now, it depends on your poison here. Jack O'Shea kept going and finished up with a loss to Clare in 1992, and those last few years were a lot of hardship for Kerry, whereas Fenton's getting out at the top. There's a kind of beauty in one, but there's also another kind of beauty in the other. You kept doing it like James McCarthy, for instance. He literally put every last drop that he had inside him for Dublin football, whereas there's a kind of a glory in doing what Fenton's doing, but I don't know, for most people, even outside of Dublin, it feels a bit of a shame that he's going now.
Yeah. Well, look, you just wish him well and congrats and phenomenal career. We'll try and talk to him at some stage, but I think his heights were pretty much untouchable. He was just that phenomenal. So out he goes at 31. Is he only 31?
31, yeah. And he had that move as well where he would, and not that he was showboating or taunting, but he used to show the ball with one hand to the guy who was kind of marking him. And then before they figured out what was going on, he sort of gazelle leaped off in bounds. And you're just thinking, what a freak show. And there was a couple of particularly around 2020, when people don't remember those games for obvious reason, and 21 as well. That semi-final against Mayo, Dublin came out for the second half under a bit of pressure, and he turned into a monster. I went through it this morning for something I'm writing tomorrow, and he missed, of all Desi Farrell's league and championship games, he missed one through suspension. And he played basically every minute of every other one. There was one league game against Tyrone last year when Dublin were cruising, and they gave him the last 20 minutes off. But that cliche about your best ability being your availability, like, he never had injuries. He just always looked the sort of guy who was too springy to be injured, and you couldn't get near him to collide with him hard enough to give him an impact injury as well. So I know people say nice things about people when they retire, but I'm not sure we're going to see too many Brian Fentons anywhere in the country over the next 10 years.
I agree. We're out of time. We have Chrissy McCaig and Paddy Talley to talk about.
Unbelievable.
I know.
I've been promised this dairy manager chat for weeks.
Northern Ireland and Israel, and we're leaving it what?
This was all Chrissy McCaig until Brian Fenton dropped this bombshell last night.
We're going to do, I swear we're going to do it.
It's going to be a separate show.
We're doing
Chrissy McCaig week next week.
Chrissy McCaig, Paddy Talley special next week at some stage. Conan, thank you.
Thank you.
Shout out to Protestant Dave. Email in, by the way. What was Conan like to live with? And Conor McKeown, thank you.
Thank you, Joe.